Hello, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to get into defining introverted thinking. This is the fourth cognitive function so far that I've been defining. This will be the last of the thinking and feeling functions. So introverted thinking is the dominant cognitive function for INTPs and ISTPs, and it's the secondary cognitive function for ENTPs and ESTPs. If you don't know what a cognitive function is, I will have linked down below my Myers Briggs 101 playlist. So today what I'm going to do, like I've been doing for all these videos, is I'm going to take quotes from Carl Jung, Vanderhoop, and Myers Briggs and kind of say, what did they say introverted thinking is and how did they define it? And based on their quotes from their books, which I have listed here in the dates the books came out, I'm going to then compile those into the key themes and the key words so we can get a sense of, okay, what is introverted thinking from the people who coined these terms. And then after we get into the key words and key themes, I want to display it in a picture. I want to say, okay, in America in 2023, as a caricature, a stereotype, if I'm going to really play up some of these characteristics, what can you look for? Like if you're trying to identify what an introverted thinker looks like, what can you be looking for? So the organization of this is from most theoretical and probably most technically correct down to most practical and probably least technically correct, but it has a little bit more usability to people who don't want, these theoretical abstractions. Okay, so let's get into what Carl Jung says about it. Kant, in this case he was representing TI for their context, restricts himself to a critique of knowledge in general. The introverted thinking type is characterized by a priority of the thinking I've just described. So introverted thinking is characterized by a critique of knowledge in general. And so this theme of critiquing knowledge really will show up again and again, critiquing knowledge in general. And this was contrasted from extroverted thinking trying to extensively control things, but instead of trying to use knowledge, there are several quotes about TE wanting to use knowledge for outcomes, whereas TI is not trying to leverage knowledge for outcomes, but it's just trying to critique knowledge in general and get to truth. Intensity is his aim, not extensity. His judgment appears cold, obstinate, arbitrary, and inconsiderate, simply because he is related less to the object than the subject. So in the case of personality, object and subject kind of loosely means external and internal. So because he's related less to the external than he is to the internal, that can appear kind of inconsiderate when you're so inward looking. And so this intensity of knowledge, this is something that precision will come up. So intensely getting deeper and deeper into nuance, fine shades of thinking is something that's going to come up. So getting deeper and deeper into the fine shades. By his wider circle, he is counted inconsiderate and domineering. But the better one knows him, the more favorable one's judgment becomes, and his nearest friends are well aware how to value his intimacy. To people who judge him from afar, he appears prickly, inaccessible, haughty. Frequently, he may even seem soured as a result of his antisocial prejudices. So this is kind of interesting. This is contrasted from TE. TE had the opposite. TE, they said that from the outside to people on the periphery, you can see their impressive accomplishments, but the closer you get to them, they seem more like a tyrant. And this is the opposite. This is saying that from the outside, the further you are, they might seem prickly and inaccessible. But your judgment of them is going to become more favorable the closer you get. In the pursuit of his ideas, he is generally stubborn, headstrong, and quite unamenable to influence. His suggestibility to personal influences is in strange contrast to this. So this will become a theme as well. Stubborn, headstrong, difficult to convince that they're wrong will become a theme. However, if you have a personal influence, I'm thinking like a spouse maybe or something like that, they're quite suggestible. They are open to things from personal influence, which is, there becomes a very interesting romantic flavor with introverted thinking. I really didn't expect to see anything about romance coming up in introverted thinking, but there was quite a bit about love, romance, personal influences, and how it kind of contrasts from their logical nature. It's very contrasting, and so that was a surprise to me. That was very fascinating. In thinking out his problems to the utmost of his ability, he also complicates them and constantly becomes entangled in every possible scruple. However clear to himself the inner structure of his thoughts may be, he is not in the least clear where and how they link up with the world of reality. So this is something, this complicating thoughts, entangled in thoughts, scrupulous, and it's this complex inner structure of thoughts. I like this inner structure of thoughts phrase. And it's very complicated, complex. It says it might seem clear to them. It's a complicated inner structure, but nevertheless seems clear to the TI user. But convincing others, or, what are we going to do with these thoughts? There seems to be a disconnect. His communication style is usually loaded and complicated by all sorts of accessories, qualifications, saving clauses, doubts, etc., which spring from his exacting scrupulousness. This is one of the easiest ways to tell a TI user, in my opinion. The saving clauses, it depends, your mileage may vary, I was exaggerating, I don't mean exactly that, I mean X. So many clauses, so many modifiers and qualifiers, and so many clauses. It's so interesting because they're trying to get exact, precise language. It reminds me of On the Giver, when they're like precision of language. Not in the dominating dystopia type of way. They're not like domineering with their precision of language, but they have this like very precise language. This is something that like on my YouTube channel I've really had to work on, including more and more of it depends, and your mileage may vary, and it could depend on X, and it's not all the time, but sometimes, or in general, there is a tendency to, but not all the time, putting all these clauses in, because I've found like so many times, like in the comments, then I get this, wait, I don't think all the time, and I never mean to make the impression that I think all the time, but because I don't specify not all the time, then, so anyways, this is something that I've begun over the course of my YouTube channel, putting in these saving clauses and qualifications, because I find it does eliminate misunderstanding. It does serve a purpose, but it's not something that I like for sake of speed. It's not something that I find to be very efficient. His work goes slowly and with difficulty. There's a methodical nature, an exactitude, scrupulousness, and a complicated nature. Either he is taciturn, or he falls among people who cannot understand him, whereupon he proceeds to gather further proof of the unfathomable stupidity of man. So this will begin several quotes about a reserved nature, taciturn, that's one option, or if they are among people, feels misunderstood. FI and TI both had a lot of quotes about feeling misunderstood, these introverted judging functions. Very, very, they have strong convictions, both FI and TI. However, neither one very good with expression and what to do with those things. And this is TI in a vacuum. This is not really describing if you have any or SE. This is just TI only. So you could use your other functions certainly to compensate for this. But then there also will begin a theme of the stupidity of man, or kind of a hubris. There will become a theme of other people don't think critically. I think critically, so I can't trust what anyone else says because I'm the only one who thinks critically. So this is kind of interesting. Introverted thinking shows a dangerous tendency to coerce facts into the shape of its image, or by ignoring them altogether, to unfold its fantasy image in freedom. There also is a theme with freedom. Freedom to have its own thoughts. Okay, this is what I think, and I want the freedom to have this thought, and I will coerce facts if needed. It was kind of interesting because I feel like TI is a lot of time associated with deductive reasoning. Now, I haven't seen any evidence of that. I'm not saying that it's not, and TI users in my experience do seem very deductive, but it almost was the opposite. They were almost saying that TE was deductive, that TE will start with facts and continue on with facts, whereas introverted thinking will start with the thought, the theory, the thought, and then they'll go find facts that fit it and ignore facts that don't fit it. That's kind of what this quote is saying. So I find that to be very interesting. The subjectively, or internally, the internally orientated thinking then appears quite arbitrary. Arbitrary means based on random choice or a personal whim, rather than reason or a system. So it appears quite arbitrary, while the extroverted thinking seems to have an incommensurability that is altogether dull and banal. Thus, the two standpoints are incessantly at war. So this is interesting. So this is kind of like worst case scenario for both of them. There was a quote in there that said the TE quote was something like, these are the facts, therefore these are the facts. So it's kind of like what I'm doing right now. It's like, this is what Carl Jung said, therefore this is what Carl Jung said. Does that seem dull and banal? perhaps, yeah. What am I contributing that's new to this thing? Nothing, really. It's just like Carl Jung said this, therefore Carl Jung said this. So worst case scenario, it does seem kind of dull. The worst case scenario for introverted thinking is it appears kind of arbitrary. Like, where did you get this? You know, I've heard them advocate for things. They make it sound like it's a fact when it's an opinion. And it's like, where are you getting this? I've heard all sorts of things from TI users. It always seems to go beyond the object, leaving behind it a flavor of a certain subjective superiority. Kind of going beyond the other, leaving behind kind of this internal superiority. So this is more of this hubris that I talked about. If to his eyes his product appears subjectively correct and true, it must also be so in practice, and others have simply got to bow to its truth. It's very interesting, this, if I think it's correct and true, others have got to bow down to it. As more of the theme of, I suppose, hubris, not trusting others to do their own critical thinking, thinking that its own thoughts are the correct ones. And I find that this is all internal. It's like an internal superiority. I don't find that they say anything like that, but it's a flavor of superiority or an air of superiority that's not, it's never voiced. They never say anything directly superior, but it's in the communication that they believe they're right. And I don't know why you would believe you're wrong. You wouldn't go around saying something if you thought you were wrong. But the door being open to a possibility of being wrong is not. It's like slammed shut. And that's where I think the hubris comes in. Then too, his outward appearance is often gauche, means awkward, as if he were painfully anxious to escape observation. Or he may show a remarkable unconcern and almost childlike naivety. So this will become a theme, this awkwardness. You know, I know that TI has the stereotype of being awkward, and I really didn't anticipate from Jung or Vanderhooper, like these older people, them to be talking about awkward so plainly as they are. The word awkward came up several times. In this case, it's the word gauche, but the word awkward came up. In his own particular field of work, he provokes violent contradiction. So there's a very provoking nature, critiquing nature. They talked about TE constructing, and I get the sense for TI it's destructing. There's been much more of an emphasis on the critical side. I feel like for the extroverted judging functions, extroverted feeling and extroverted thinking, they were more in the positive sense. So FE focused on the positive feelings for a positive outcome. TE focusing on the information that will construct something that we can use to make an outcome. FI being more focused on internally digging in to the nuance of, in a lot of cases, negative feeling. There was a big melancholic bent. And with TI, it's this digging in and getting deeper on the fine shades of thinking and how things are distinct, and that involves a lot of critique. The various measures of self-defense, the curious protective obstacles with which such people are wont to surround themselves, they all serve as a defense against magical influences. A vague dread of the other sex also belongs to this category. He may develop into a misanthropic bachelor with a childlike heart. This is interesting. A vague dread of the opposite sex. I mean, this is such a good TI quote. I've known a lot of bachelors that are TI doms. A lot of bachelors. Like, you're talking like not married in your 40s, you know, and a lot of them being TI. And so they talk about these self-defense measures. There's a lot of self-defense up, I feel, with the opposite sex, I feel, with TI. Okay, so that's Carl Jung. Moving on to Vanderhoop. He tries to arrange the opinions which he takes over from others in a system of his own. In doing so, he will take up a more critical attitude in regard to the thought material which he is taught than do extroverted thinkers. And his aim is to follow the guidance of his own opinions and convictions. So yeah, it's wanting to take the information that you get and make your own system and have it fit into your own opinions and your own convictions. And this is, again, we have this word critical. There's a lot of critiquing, critical. They take a more critical attitude in regard to the thought material which he is taught than do extroverted thinkers. I mean, this is kind of an embarrassing story, but I remember when I was, I think I was a junior in high school, and this was the first time that I came upon, I had met Garrett, I was like 16, we weren't dating yet, and he had talked about disagreeing with a book, and I was like, oh, you disagree with books you read sometimes? This is embarrassing. Why had I not thought of this? Why had I not thought to ever critically engage with something I was reading? It's embarrassing. But through my time being around introverted thinkers and introverted feelers, I find, oh, okay, we're allowed to disagree with thought leaders. Oh, that's interesting. While the strength of the extroverted thinker lies in his easy application of systematized knowledge, the introverted thinker is particularly good at comparing systems and principles. There are many fine shades of meaning in his ideas. Let's talk about the extroverted thinker. They want to apply the knowledge. For the introverted thinker, it's like a comparing and contrasting of systems and principles. And once again, we get this fine shades of meaning. So you're comparing and contrasting until you get the fine nuances. This phrase, fine shades, was only ever used in extroverted feelings so far that I've noticed. An extroverted feeling had fine shades of feelings, and introverted thinking has fine shades of meaning in his ideas. So it's like a fine distinction of thoughts. So now we get into the children of this type. The children section's always been so fascinating. So for extroverted thinking, they wanted to be authorities. For introverted feelers, they were dreamy and reserved and showed a disappointment in the world at an early age. For extroverted feelers, they really idealized their parents and idealized people around them and admired them. So now for TI, children of the type are often reserved, somewhat timid and uncertain, and seem not to feel at home in this world. Same with FI. FI had that same not feel at home in this world. On the other hand, they will at the same time manifest an obstinate, somewhat pedantic decisiveness, taking up a more fanatical stand, which may easily degenerate into dogmatism. I put the definition for dogmatism, the tendency to lay down principles as incontrovertibly true without consideration of evidence or the opinions of others. An extreme pedantry, and that is obsessive concern with minor details. So it's like, it's very interesting, this push-pull between you got this reserved, timid nature. Then at the same time, when you feel like something is wrong, taking a fanatical stand, obsessively concerned with details. No, this principle is true without consideration of maybe new evidence or without consideration of opinions of others. Just, I know this to be true and this is true. And this push-pull between this reservedness and this fanatical stand. In general, both children and adults of this type are, as a result of introversion, difficult to convince that they are mistaken. So part of this headstrong, stubborn, this is potentially getting into hubris, but once again, we have the stupidity of man, so I'm not going to let some stupid person convince me that I'm wrong. Their inner logical reasoning makes them feel that they are right. I found this interesting, makes them feel that they are right, because we're talking about thinking, and your logical reasoning making you feel that you are right. Their attitude is, in general, more skeptical in regard to the validity of any truth than is that of the thinking extrovert. So yeah, skepticism, critique, is this truth valid? Their words are usually carefully chosen and weighed, and thus are kind of a mask. People of this type are usually aware of this, but they see no possibility of adopting any different attitude. This reminds me a lot of what they said about FI. Both FI and TI, huge emphasis on this mask, this reserved mask, and feeling misunderstood and not feeling at home in the world. Both of them also talked about carefully weighing their words. So with TI, they're talking about a careful weighing of words. With FI, it was talking about when they express themselves in poetry, a careful choosing and weighing of words. And words being carefully chosen, this goes back to what Jung said about there being lots of saving clauses and how their speech is just full of qualifiers and modifiers, making sure the meaning is precise. One usually learns to know them better in a smaller circle, where they will be more spontaneous and even cordial or original. But even so, with a tendency to be awkward as a result of oversensitiveness or irascibility. Irascibility meaning easily angered. So here you go again, where you can see that maybe they seem aloof, maybe they seem haughty from, when you're far away, but you get into a smaller circle, you get to know them, and they seem cordial and original. And I find that they are. I feel like they are generally cordial. And especially because this is just introverted thinking in a vacuum. They, combine it with SE or NE, and those are very cordial functions, I would say. But even so, with a tendency to be awkward, again with this word awkward, the word awkward comes up a lot. I was very surprised to see oversensitiveness. That's not something that I associate, and I feel like a lot of TI users online would like to act like there's no sensitivity at all. And easily angered, that's something I do notice. I have seen TI users calling other people too sensitive or too emotional, while at the same time being easily angered. And I'm like, hey, TI, anger is an emotion. The introverted thinker will sometimes have a great deal to say on such subjects, but he's not for all that better or more skilled in practice. The introverted thinker, when in love, feels awkward, uncertain, and ridiculous. He will try and talk himself out of his feelings, or else make endless preparations to give expression to them, which is naturally scarcely conducive to spontaneity. So again, we have the word awkward, uncertain, ridiculous. It comes over and over again. The word awkward came up many, many, many times. As I was putting together this presentation, I was like, a lot of these quotes are kind of like negative or pointing out the downsides. And I was like, did I just choose? I was like, did I kind of subconsciously, being a T user, did I just pick a bunch of negative quotes? So I went back to the work. I went back specifically looking for positive quotes from Jung or Van der Hoopen. Nope, this is what we get. This is the way they talk about it. So if it seems a little negative, I really did try to not paint it in such a way. Okay, now moving on to Myers and Briggs. TI users are perceptive, not dominating, as the decisiveness of the thinking usually shows only in intellectual matters. Yeah, I find this to be true. It's like usually reserved in general, but if an intellectual matter comes up that strikes one of their convictions, then all of a sudden you'll see some of this fanaticism. Are outwardly quiet, reserved, detached, perhaps even aloof, except with intimates. So once again, we have this big contrast between how they are with intimates and how they are with the general public. Are inclined towards shyness, especially when young, as the chief interests of introverted thinking are little help in small talk or social contacts. This is where there have been several quotes where you can really see the contrast between extroverted feeling and introverted thinking, because extroverted feeling was all about the social contacts. And there was nothing about awkward and extroverted feeling. But in introverted thinking, we're getting a lot about shy, awkward, having a hard time with small talk and social contact. So you can kind of see how they're in a polarity and opposites. Introverted thinkers use their thinking to analyze the world, not run it. Has a tendency to neglect facts or to coerce them into agreement with the idea, selecting only those that support the idea. Consists of an inner thought activity tied loosely, if at all, to the stream of sense impressions, which are dimmed by the vividness of the stream of inner impressions. It's the vividness of the stream of inner impressions, an inner thought activity. I just thought that was beautifully phrased. Are analytical and impersonal, are interested primarily in underlying principles. A lot about analytical and a lot about principles. The word principles was used many, many times. It's probably the most used word. Both the working life and the personal life of the introverted thinkers will go better if they take the trouble to do two simple things. Say an appreciative word when praise is honestly due, and mention the points on which they agree with another person before they bring up the points on which they disagree. It creates an impression that TI users are very negative when they're so reserved when they agree with things. Okay, they agree, so they're quiet. Then they disagree, and boom, then they're right there, all of a sudden showing an interest. So that's where you get this haughty, prickly, you've got to match it. See, this is striking me as very FE, saying an appreciative word when it's honestly due, and making mention of where you agree before you disagree. Okay, so now I want to get into the underlying themes. What did I see coming up over and over and over again? The number one word that I saw was principles, over and over and over again. For extroverted thinking, it was systems. For introverted feeling, it was morals or misunderstood. For extroverted feeling, it was harmony. And for introverted thinking, it's principles. I saw it over and over again. So some keywords I saw were facts, principles, theories, thoughts, truth, clause, opinions, convictions, thought system, thought material, inner logical reasoning, validity of truth, pet principles, intellectual matters, analyze. So many, and there were some slides. I had more slides, but I deleted some. So some of these words may come from quotes that you didn't see, but just a lot of validity of truth, inner logical reasoning, principles, theories. I mean, I feel like this slide really is a good chunk of TI, like 60% of TI maybe. I mean, it's a lot. This is a lot of it right here. The next theme I saw was kind of an intricacy with the thoughts, a fine shading with the thoughts, intensely burrowing down. So I find that they're like intricately getting into one topic. Like if introverted thinking was in a vacuum, no NE, no SE, no other functions. This function in itself, digging deep, burrowing down into getting complex and finer shades of meaning. Intensity is his aim. Complicates. Entangled in every possible scruple. Make endless preparations. Precise. This is probably point number 2. I mean, precise everywhere. Their communication style has accessories, qualifications, saving clauses, and doubts. Exacting scrupulousness. His work goes slowly. Fine shades of meaning in his ideas. Pedantic. Pedantry. Fanatical exactitude in details. Words are carefully chosen and weighed. I should have got rid of that comment. But just so much precision. So much with accuracy and precision, fine shades of meaning. This is probably the secondary thing that I would call out about introverted thinking. Precision is so important. Reserved. Reserved came up over and over again. Appears cold, inaccessible, taciturn, reserved, timid, studied, seldom spontaneous, mask, outwardly quiet, reserved, and detached, aloof, shyness, skeptical. So this was something that was very contrasted from TE, and a lot of times when they talked about the skepticism, it was usually in a contrasting way with TE. So critique of knowledge in general, provokes violent contradiction, critical attitude of thought material, skeptical of the validity of truth. So there's definitely a critiquing, like just because they're presented with something doesn't necessarily mean that they think that it's true. Definite critiquing. Stubborn. Generally stubborn, headstrong, and quite unamenable to influence. Obstinate, pedantic decisiveness, difficult to convince they are mistaken. So there was a lot about stubbornness and inner conviction, difficult to convince. Okay, hubris. There was a lot of quotes about hubris. Appears arbitrary, prickly, haughty, unfathomable stupidity of man, coerce the facts, others must bow to its truth, flavor of superiority, dogmatism, difficult to convince they are mistaken, great deal to say on such subjects that it's not better in practice, surly, irascibility. And it is a big difference from FE. You know, each of these, toward the end of each section, they'll kind of get into negative aspects of each one. And with FE, it was a lot about denial and denying negative things or unharmonious things for the sake of keeping the harmony. This is kind of the opposite. This is like a tendency to dive right in to the things that are disagreed upon, and really with a lacking regard for harmony. If someone is TI only, you know, if they were TI in a vacuum. Awkward, this is the last one. I just feel so sad. The word awkward was used many, many times. Many repetitions of the word awkward. Probably, 5 to 10 times I read the word awkward. Awkward, gauche, painfully anxious, childlike naivete, self-defense of vague dread of the opposite sex, timid, uncertain, introverted thinking is little help in small talk or social contacts. So yeah, there was, maybe it's just because I'm a thinker as well. I don't get some of this awkwardness, but when I talk to TI users, it becomes really clear that they perceive themselves to be awkward, which I just find kind of sad. Okay, so now I want to get into one slide that had some of the main key words on it. So I'll remove my face in a second, but if you want to screenshot this, if you want to, if I was going to show a beginner something, like I was trying to tell them what the definition of these things are, this might be somewhere I would start. I would just show it. So we have these words here: precise, reserved, contrarian, theories, thoughts, opinions, convictions, truth, intellectual, logical, reasoning, complex, exactitude, careful word choice, detached, quiet, critique, knowledge, validity of truth, skeptical, stubborn, obstinate, critical, awkward, distinctions, accuracy, technical, and principles, the main word. So I chose this picture because if I'm thinking about introverted thinking, I'm thinking about INTPs and ISTPs. And I felt like this is something that either an INTP or an ISTP you could find doing. This, to be working on, maybe they're building a computer or a TV, I'm not sure what this is, but tinkering on something. And I see this a lot with introverted thinking users, a tinkering by themselves. It's something that you do by yourself. It requires precision to do all this. It requires a lot of technical knowledge. You would have to intensively get into the knowledge about, cars or TVs or whatever the thing is that you're building. You have to have a lot of accuracy to do this. And it's something that you need a lot of technical skill in, technical names of parts, precise language with parts, and you can do on your own. It's a very reserved, quiet thing that you can work on by yourself. So now this is my slide on introverted thinking as a caricature. If I'm really trying to play up the caricature, play up the stereotypes, this might be introverted thinking in a slide. And as this is the introverted thinking video, and I mentioned many of my videos, your mileage may vary. This is stuff that I've observed in American culture in 2023. So yeah, these are really caricatures. This was a very difficult slide for me to make. Introverted feeling and introverted thinking so far have been the most difficult slides to make because there is a lot of nuance with individuals with introverted judging functions. And also it's an introverted function. So how do you display externally what an introverted function is doing? So a lot of this is relying on SE or NE coupled with TI to kind of give expression to what TI is doing. So some of this is very related to SE and NE because it's very hard to get away from extroverted functions when you're dealing with an external image. Okay, this first one, this is an INTP meme. People, I don't know what to wear, INTPs. So I think this applies to ISTPs and INTPs as well, if I'm being honest. We've got office, hangout, party, date. With extroverted feeling, which is the opposite of introverted thinking. They talked a lot about fine shades of nuance with what is appropriate and tactful for each situation, and not doing anything that's not appropriate or tactful. So part of that I've noticed is when they dress, there is a big sense of appropriateness of what you wear to each function, and they definitely kind of customize different things to appropriateness for each function. Introverted thinking, you could argue that this is not appropriate to any of these things. I think that's not a good date outfit. That's not a good office outfit. Hang out, maybe. Hang out and party are kind of very similar. So it's almost like inappropriate in every occasion. It's the opposite of fine shades of nuance. There's literally no nuance with social things. So the opposite of fine shades of nuance with social things, in particular, dressing for social appropriateness, I just think that's not a TI thing. So they pick something easy that they don't really care that much about. Now that will vary depending on your levels of NE. I've seen some INTPs dress very flamboyantly depending on their levels of NE. It could depend on SE, but I think that's very chill. It's a chill outfit. It's a good representation. Then the ISTP or INTP females I know, pretty similar. I think that there is more pressure on women to focus more on how they dress, but I would say there's jeans and shirts still very typical for the TP females as well. The next one, I have someone looking at a car, and the one after that, someone working on a computer. So there are many different hobbies that you could have, and I think NE and SE definitely will play into that. But something that I've noticed with ITPs is they have a hobby that they get intensely into. A lot of knowledge about cars, a lot of knowledge about computers. I know a female ISTP, so much knowledge of motorcycles. I know an ESTP, a lot of knowledge about sailboats and sailboat parts and building sailboats. A lot of it for the INTPs that I know, it's a lot computers, one that really likes to build his own coffee machines, video editing, but it's a hobby that you do alone, that you have a lot of tech that will require a technical knowledge system. Like, when you think about a car, there's so many parts, so much technical vocabulary, how things work together, and it's this thought system. And kind of liking to be authority on your own, like not taking the car into the shop this is kind of an ISTP stereotype, or wanting to work on your own computer. There's kind of a wanting to do it yourself and not have the authority to do it just because it's fun. It seems, to me, from an observer, that's what it seems like. But, you could insert the hobby of choice, but I think two of the main ones would be cars and computers for TI. In the bottom one, we got this, memes it really seemed like the appropriate thing for TI. It seemed appropriate. ISTP, being told to do something. Is this an attack on my intelligence? And so it's very independent. There were lots of quotes about them being stubborn. There were some quotes about hubris. So being told to do something seems kind of offensive to TI. That's another one of those things where like TE and TI are kind of at war with each other. Poke holes in and sharpen all of his ideas. Wait, define bread. And then the INTP is like, I don't know which one to pick. So I thought that this illustrated a few things. Poke holes in and sharpen all of his ideas. I think that either of these could work for INTPs or ISTPs. This one, the poke holes in and sharpen all of his ideas, maybe is a little bit more NTP, but still I have seen ESTPs do these things as well, and ENTPs. Maybe ISTPs are the only ones I don't see it in as much. But it's this critique of other people's. And I also like that this kind of like poke holes in and sharpen all of his ideas. It's not necessarily from an ill intent to be so critical, but it's like maybe iron sharpens iron. But then it's like, define bread. And there's all these key definitions and precision of language and a fine shading between words. I find there's a huge emphasis on a distinction between words. And you get into an argument with them and it's like, I've been in a conversation where it's like, wait, good. Do you mean good to mean moral, or do you mean good to mean skilled? Or, you get into these like shades of meaning. So you can get into this with TI like, wait, definition of bread, and so there's a lot of talk about underlying principles, and definitions become a big part of that. I find that part of this precision of language is I'll hear TI users correct themselves a lot. Like they'll be telling a story and say, last May I went to Disneyland, and they're like, oh, no, that's incorrect. It was last April. And to me as a TE user, it's like, okay, well, the outcome of the story is you went to Disneyland. Obviously, we just care about the outcome, but no. Fine distinctions, and it makes things a little slower. There was definitely a speed emphasis with TE and kind of a slow, methodical emphasis with TI, but wanting to make sure that the truth is valid in the end. The next one, I happened to pick car parts. You could insert a different machine, like maybe a computer or motorcycle, or, insert the thing. but a technical language with whatever they're interested in. I find that they are usually interested in these systems that have a lot of technical vocabulary and technical jargon. And sometimes when TI users will explain something to me, I find myself lost in vocabulary and technical jargon terms. Caliper, bleeder valve, I don't know what these things are. Maybe some of these are kind of more well-known terms. I mean, I don't know some of these terms, but it's using technical, precise terms for whatever their hobby is and having a lot of jargon. It fascinates me that introverted thinkers usually have hobbies with jargon involved. I've seen some introverted thinkers really get into religion, and there's all sorts of these, philosophical terms that mean very specific things. Within personality, objective and subject mean very specific things in this context. Computer parts, there's just a lot of precision of language. The last one's just kind of a funny one, so it's like a normal gun, a gun in a movie, unlimited ammo. And I just find that TI users are kind of the ones to point out that, like, my dad's an ISTP, and he'll count. Anytime there's gunshots in a movie, he counts how many there are before they need to reload. And I think it's because, he's interested in guns. For him, that's his, system of choice. Like cars, I think my dad kind of likes cars and guns, but, you got your system of choice, and how things work. And it gets into that kind of the critiquing of things. There is kind of and it's not done in a rude way. It's just kind of a humorous thing. You combine that with messy or any, and it's just kind of a humorous critiquing of things. It's pointing out when things externally are not making sense to the internal. So yeah, I did my best, and I did have to resort to some memes or things. Those are not even like external real world things, but yeah, in general, things where people are tinkering by themselves on a logical system that may have a lot of technical, intense knowledge. They talked about intensity is their aim. So really getting into one hobby deeply that has a lot of technical information and jargon is something that I've noticed. So yeah, that is my video on introverted thinking. I've just finished up all the judging functions. So all the thinking and feeling functions are done. In the description box, I will have a playlist linked for all the personality types. So if you want to know all of my ISTP content in one place, I've got that playlist. You want to know the INTP playlist, that'll be linked below. So yeah, check those out down below. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.